Today's lecture on our unit of ancient Rome is going to ask a very simple question: Is Rome better off with an empire? And then very much, what is Roman life like during this time of peace and prosperity that is the Pax Romana? So that's the kind of what we want to get into today, to be able to kind of give some backstory. What is it like to live in this Roman Empire? From roughly the reign of Octavian Augustus as emperor to 180 AD, so 27 BC to 180 AD, Rome is at the peak of its power. It covers 1/9 of the Earth's surface. 3 million square miles are ruled by the Caesars in Rome. It stretches from Portugal and Spain and the Iberian Peninsula in North Africa on the Atlantic to the west, to Mesopotamia and the Tigris Euphrates in the east, from the Scottish Highlands in the north in Britain to the Egyptian Sudanese border in the south. 60 to 80 million inhabitants are to have been ruled and have their lives controlled by the Caesars in Rome. The city of Rome itself in the first century AD has over 1 million people in its environs, making it one of the great metropolises of the world at that time period, or for most of world history. This time period is called the Pax Romana. This is a period of Roman peace and prosperity within the Roman Empire. Pax is Latin for peace, Romana for Roman, Roman peace. It makes sense and easy there. What allows this to occur, and what allows for Rome, particularly in the West, to last for as long as it does, is the efficiency and greatness of the government that Octavian Augustus sets up upon his ascension to the throne as emperor. And Augustus's ability to stabilize the frontiers, to be able to have the leap of logic to move the Roman legions from Italy itself to the frontiers, to keep expanding, to keep bringing more territory and more peoples and more land and more treasure under the control of Rome, as well as the government that he sets up, allows for the empire for a very long time to not really be dictated and controlled too much just by one singular emperor, but it's the underlings and the bureaucracy that sets it up and keeps it going. And Augustus is able to do this by setting up a civil service to administer the empire. Similar like what we saw with the Chinese civil service, and why China is able to last in its government for thousands of years into the 20th century, is this bureaucracy where merit and skills are rewarded rather, for the most part, than political connections or rising people. And this civil service very much allows the empire to be driven on its own through these underlings as the eyes and ears of the emperor, and the emperor's representative and the extension of his power through this landed control. And the stability and effectiveness of these civil servants help control the various parts of the empire. And we can have some really interesting characters as people, as characters in the story of history here, be emperor and not really have it affect too much the day-to-day lives of the people because of the civil servants controlling that small areas. And Augustus is very much borrowing this from Alexander the Great, who's borrowing it from the Persians. So it's not like he's just making this up whole cloth, but it's this ability for this system to run as well as it does that's going to become a model for government and government administrations for thousands of years after it. We did this on our Rome maps for homework, and hopefully they very much look like this. But again, just the amount of territory that Rome is able to conquer at the height, from the Scottish Highlands in the north, the Egyptian Sudanese border in the south, the Atlantic Ocean on Portugal, Spain, and North Africa to the west, the Tigris Euphrates towards the Caspian Sea in the east. This is a giant amount of territory, in theory, controlled by a singular person in Rome. If we lift this up off of Europe and we place it on top of the United States for context, you can see the similar size that it's taking up. And again, we may have the caveat being that my laser pointer, the central part of this is water. But again, you get a sense of scale for the size of the empire and the ability for these ancient peoples to control this amount of territory in the time period they're living in. One of the effective things that Octavian recognizes right away is to remove these legions from Italy by taking them out of Italy, moving them on the periphery. You're not only protecting your borders, but you're also giving impetus and the ability for people who want to make names for themselves the opportunity go expand on the borders. And if you're the general, the Fifth Legion down here in southern Egypt, and you feel you should be the emperor, it's going to take you a long time to get yourself to Italy, enough time for any emperor to come to compromise, make some deals, play some off, or defeat them in battle. And the big reason why we have this peace and prosperity coming out of this time of multiple civil wars is the effectiveness of this government, as well as the effectiveness of the leaders in charge. And we very much have a unquestioned, for the most part, ascension of who dies and then who takes over. And a lot of that is the groundwork laid by Augustus and Octavian. For an agricultural society that Rome is, and that's the leading business of the Roman Empire, is agriculture. Urbanization is the key characteristic of Roman civilization. The ability of the Romans to live in cities is what marks the Romans different from other peoples that we've seen before. Yes, you're a rich person, you have your latifundia, and your estate, but you don't live there, right? You visit there, it's an extension of you, but you live in a city. The Aristotelian idea that a barbarian lives in the countryside, a man, a citizen lives in a city. And that very much characterizes the Romans versus some other peoples. And what we'll see is Roman towns and cities through these 3 million square miles dotting the landscape. Now, the heart of every Roman city was the Forum. And the Forum was the religious, economic, political, and judicial center for each and every one of these cities. My class is assigned a travel log project where they go and they pick a city and they make a travel book for it. And for every one of those cities, you very much could do, let's visit the Forum and tell me about that it's in there. And that becomes kind of the heart in what goes and expands out of all these different cities, whether you're in Portugal or Scotland or Egypt or North Africa or Galatia. So that's what we see there. Now, in these cities, the Romans are going to build and maintain large public buildings for the people to enjoy, to people to visit, to interact with. And so we see taverns, snack shops, public toilets, as well as places of entertainment and relaxation. We'll talk about in future lectures amphitheaters and theaters and circuses to be able to see gladiators and actors and actresses and chariot races, as well as places of relaxation like a public toilet, bathhouse, which we'll get into more towards the end of the slide here. And so these are all built to be able to provide places for people to go and things for them to do. And again, idle hands are the devil's playthings is the old adage. You've got something to do here, let's go and do it. For most people, for most, again, the common man, the common woman, most are going to live in apartments or townhouses. You think of several, 2 or 3 stories tall, shared walls and ceilings. For the most part, cramped kind of conditions. The richer you are, the more space you're able to afford and to be able to construct and live in. And those all comes with the strengths and weaknesses of living in there. Now, to provide water for all these people, as well as to remove waste from these cities, most, if not all, the Roman cities are going to be supplied with water brought by aqueducts to the city, finding lakes and rivers in the hinterland and bringing fresh, clean water right to the heart of the city itself. And in some of these richer towns and richer estates in the city into the very homes of the Romans. So not only public fountains, but as well as indoor water applications as well. I mean, some place in the United States won't have indoor plumbing until the 1970s, 50 years ago, and the Romans have water being brought to their houses daily for mostly for the rich, but in some of the more well-watered areas of the empire. To help connect and bind the empire together, as well as very simply allowing the military to move quickly where it needs to go. The Roman military built roads to connect the empire, and these roads very much bind and create a way to move quickly, efficiently people, goods, and ideas throughout the empire for the length and breadth of it. And so it's those roads that tie everybody within the Roman Empire into one kind of central idea of what it means of a Roman. If we strip away all the geographic features, like the author of this map was able to do, and we just plot the different settlements that we see in there, we very much find the Mediterranean coastline. You can see the Nile River in there. You can see Italy very clearly. And this is, again, what makes it Roman, is this idea that you live in a city that makes you a citizen, that makes you a human being, rather than less than barbarian people out in the wilderness. Those are the others. We are Romans. We live in a city, and that's what we see. Whether you're in North Africa and Algeria, or you're in Italy and Pompeii itself, the heart of every Roman city would be the Roman Forum. And we bring out the laser pointer. You've got the judicial center, like the Basilica here. You've got market stalls here to the right. If you turn to your left here in Pompeii, on this side, you would have the fish market. If you turn and face the north end of the Forum in Pompeii, you've got the religious temple of Jupiter in there. You've got an aqueduct coming in there, and then you've got homes and other businesses ringing there. And it very much becomes the center, whether you're there in 2019, like me and my wife, or you're there in 19 AD, the heart of every Roman city. And again, we want to just stipulate the idea that we're seeing just the what's left after 2,000 years of this, but all these would be several stories tall, and these magnificent public buildings for worship, for judicial services, for economic services, all provided for the Romans. The best example of a Roman forum would be the Forum in Rome itself. And this is where you would go to see, to be seen, to do all of your economic businesses. And again, as modern city living, very much the same idea, whether you're in the 21st century or the first century AD. And like I said, lots of different buildings. And they just opened up in the Roman Forum last year, earlier this summer, Caesar's tomb, where he was supposedly killed and then buried. That just got reopened as they're doing more and more archaeological discoveries, even in Rome itself today. Now, the best example and the best preserved example of a Roman city that we have comes to us thanks to a sad event, a very natural disaster where a lot of people lost their lives in the Roman city of Pompeii. And this has been a city that's been excavated for nearly almost, we're getting close to 300 years to this point, as we're slowly peeling back the layers of history to be able to peer back into the lives of the Roman people in this very well preserved estate, to the point where we're able to pull out human bodies from this with the pyroclastic flow and the volcanic ash, rocks, and gases buried humans, but as their flesh melted away, their bones stayed, pockets formed, and archaeologists quickly figured out ways to be able to pour plaster casts in there to be able to find the final resting places for many people throughout the city itself. And they're still finding these people, whether they're small children or young people. We can get their bones, we can get a lot of information, we can see the final death throes of these people in this horrific natural disaster that they go and they live through, including all of the animals and the artifacts and stuff that they've left behind. It's very much a snapshot into a Roman city. Now, another Roman city that's a great example is Rome itself. Again, in talks, so we don't have a whole lot of time in this chapter to get into Roman religion, but you need to make a sacrifice. You can go to the Forum in Rome or most of the other forums to be able to go and convene with the gods. There's other aspects to there, and again, the Forum would be ringed by streets with shops and stalls and people's houses in there. So this very much can be something where you make a day of it, where you leave your townhouse, you go to the Forum, right? You go and you make a sacrifice because you won your bet on a chariot race. You can watch another chariot race. You can go see a play. You can see the senators arguing. You've got food you can buy. You've got goods you can exchange. You have millions of gallons of fresh water flowing into the city and millions of gallons of dirty water flowing out, all beneath your feet in these giant viaducts and aqueducts that align the city. And we're pulling stuff out of there all the time. We talked about this idea of public buildings available for the Romans, and one example of a Roman, very much centrally, is the Roman baths. These similar-ish to the idea of a Greek gymnasium where you can exercise there, but very much something that you could go and do. And depending on the city and the stipulations, usually you've got a time in the morning where the bath is available for men to use. Then there's a turnaround, and then there's a time in the afternoon for women to use. And don't that's not a hard and fast rule. And there's a whole system of going through here where you walk into the entrance. There's cubby holes where you give your clothes to your slave, and then you walk through the kind of ritual of exercising and then going into a hot room to open up your pores. Then you might get a massage and have it scraped off of you. Then you go into a cold room to tense the muscles up. Then you go back into a steam room. And we have lots of different examples. The town of Bath in England is named after the Roman baths built by the Romans there on top of the natural springs. One of the largest baths that we have is the baths of Caracalla, built for if there's a million people in Rome, you need a big system of public baths, and that's what we have, and that's this design here. How do they get hot tubs and heated steam rooms? They built those rooms on bricks and raised them above the ground and had fires and had a system of drafting and opening to be able to move the heated air through and around not just the water, but the room itself to create a almost central air system for the first century AD. And again, there's a simple way to do that. This is the baths in Pompeii to be able to work through that. And again, that's something that would be something that if you could afford to do it, mostly in the expenditure of time, something you could do every day, including getting massaged, rubbed with oils and salts, and then using a sturgill to scrape that off of you to be able to remove any of the dead skin, sweat, or grease that you've built up while there. If you're bathing, you need water. To supply the water, we have a series of aqueducts throughout the empire. The aqueducts work similar to what we see today, where again, we're bringing water from, I'm trying to get my laser pointer up. Come on. Right, from a mountain river or other places, and then right down into the heart of the city. Instead of it being pumped in mechanically, today it's using gravity. And we see great examples throughout the Roman Empire and upwards into the 20th century. Some of these towns within the empire would still be using the aqueducts to bring all that in there. Segovia, Spain's aqueduct on the left there is a pretty striking architectural feature of the city, as well as one. And the ones on the right are the aqueducts bringing water into Rome. These could obviously reach several stories to span gaps along the mountain ranges and the undulating terrain. This is a top of the aqueduct on the right, and obviously in ancient times it would be covered to prevent stuff from contaminating that clean water as it was driven, as you see right here in Pompeii, to the heart of the city. And that's the nice thing about these. Following these aqueducts, as well as to help ease and quicken travel throughout the empire and to bind and connect the empire, would be the Roman roads. And these roads were all built uniformly. They were all built to a standard width of 6 men across, or 2 chariots going either direction would be the standard of this. These are laser level. These are dead straight, and a lot of railroads and roads throughout what used to be the Roman Empire in modern times follow these roads because of how well they're built. In some places, these still even last to today. And these roads led right into the heart of cities like Pompeii. And to keep you out of the chariot out of the forum, you've got those bricks on the road there. And again, we can see the ways to be able to do that. Within Pompeii itself, water flowed through the streets to be able to wash away dirt and grime and muck, and to keep your sandals dry. To cross the street at the crossroads, you would go and walk on these elevated stones to be able to keep the water off of your feet. The old adage is all roads lead to Rome, and within the Roman Empire, it's very much the case here as we kind of wind down with the lecture. Not only with the Via Appia, the main road into Rome, but others within Italy itself, expanding outwards throughout the Roman Empire and connecting it all together to the point where it becomes very easy for a Roman to understand the distances involved between major cities along these kind of hubs. You can make it look and design it like almost a subway map like this designer did, as well as if you go to the Orbis website, but put off by the University of Stanford library, you can actually almost do a GPS or MapQuest for the Roman Empire, to be able to see various roads of travel to move you from one part of the empire to the other, and to go from London to Alexandria in the first century AD in just 180 days just by road is pretty impressive. And that kind of speaks to the ability of the Romans to be able to go and do all this. So that's kind of just the bare tippity top of living within the Roman Empire. And in our next lecture, we're going to go and talk about some ideas of how can we entertain ourselves if we're able to get some free time.